19th century American society was strongly influenced by the Christian Church. The story of Adam and Eve led to the belief that women should be obedient to men and that men had authority. Many aspects of life, such as law, government, and culture, were shaped by religious institutions and ideals, making it so even non-religious individuals were affected. When a woman and a man married, they became one, and the one was a man. Anything that the woman brought into the marriage became the property of the man, including herself. She legally would lose her name and the right to her own body. Men were using the power that they believed were given to them by the Bible to manipulate the cultural norms, and in doing so, putting women in a place of subordination.
Inspired by groups like the Quakers and the Haudenosaunee, early American feminists demanded women's suffrage, which they claimed they were entitled to. By questioning the barriers created by dominant Christian norms, radical activists challenged the fundamental beliefs that had held women in a position of political subordination for decades. After 72 years of fighting, the 19th Amendment was passed and women finally won the right to vote.
The Haudenosaunee, called the Iroquois by French settlers, are an indigenous people who have lived in the Northeast long before European colonists. They gave themselves the name Haudenosaunee, which means people of the Longhouse. Their confederacy is composed of 6 nations: the Onondagas, the Cayugas, the Senecas, the Mohawks, the Oneidas, and the Tuscaroras. Haudenosaunee society was matrilineal, where children's lineage was through the mother. A Haudenosaunee woman had complete control of her marriage, and in the case of a separation from her husband, a woman would keep her children and property. Their society was, and continues to be, based on balance between gender roles, with both men and women having a say in government. Haudenosaunee society is a matriarchate, with women having political leadership and social privilege.
A Haudenosaunee woman had complete control. The clan mothers, they were the ones who chose the chief of the tribe, and if the chief didn't live up to their expectations, the clan mothers were the ones who removed them. It's so different from what Victorian women of the time were dealing with, where they had no say. They were a man's property, whether it be their father's property, then given to their husband, or if they did not marry or their father passed away before they were married, they became their brother's property.
In 19th century society, women were expected to have children and to perform household duties. A woman wouldn't often work outside the home. If she did have an outside job, she would be paid 20 to 50% less than a man, and she could only follow select career paths. A man's place was working and providing for the family. A woman was not often seen as a moral equal of man, which justified the limitations of her rights and responsibilities.
In New York, social interactions between the Haudenosaunee and Euro-Americans happened on a regular basis. Information about the Haudenosaunee was available in newspapers, and leading women's rights activists Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Matilda Joslyn Gage, and Lucretia Mott all knew Haudenosaunee women. As a result of interacting with Haudenosaunee women, these feminists became aware of the power and responsibilities the Haudenosaunee women exhibited in government.
It was common at the time for the church to tell men that they should make their wives obedient. It was believed that if he failed, she would die in a state of disobedience, and it would be his fault that she was eternally punished. This justified the beating of one's wife to make her compliant. If a Christian woman were to vote against her husband, she would be disobeying him. This is a reason why it was largely believed that a woman didn't need the right to vote. If women in the early 19th century had believed the subordination of women was universal, they might never have fought against the gender roles in their culture. The Haudenosaunee demonstrated a society in which women could be equal to men and have political power. The Haudenosaunee, by practicing equal rights in government, created the foundation for the early women's rights movement.
The predominant views of the time were really influenced by the church. And what the church was kind of teaching at that time is that, women were subordinate to men. And by looking at the Haudenosaunee, they knew that that wasn't the way that things had to be. That they were looking at their friends, their neighbors, the Haudenosaunee, and seeing that this kind of way of life and governing was possible, and it was happening.
The Quaker religion allowed women to participate in religious activities unlike most churches at the time. Quaker is a branch of Christianity brought from England in the 17th century. Quaker religious meetings are silent unless a participant, either a man or a woman, feels moved enough by God to say a sermon, prayer, or message. Quakers' different ways of life influenced and inspired various suffragists. Susan B. Anthony's Quaker upbringing helped her develop public speaking ability. Lucretia Mott, who was an activist and a Quaker, influenced Elizabeth Cady Stanton's thinking and development as a feminist.
Largely formed of Quakers from neighboring towns, the Seneca Falls Convention was a women's rights convention that was the first of its kind. It was held in 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York, and was broken into 6 sessions over the course of 2 days, July 19th and July 20th.
It was advertised as being just for women. It was a chance for women to look over the Declaration of Sentiments, see if they wanted to add or change anything. It was also a chance for the women to just be more comfortable in public, in a gathering of women and sharing their thoughts, something that was not encouraged in a lot of ways at that time.
This convention never intended to focus on women's right to vote, and instead was organized to discuss the civil and religious condition of women. About 300 people attended, with approximately 40 of them being men. The prospect of women holding political power at the time was unheard of, and many of the attendees believed the idea was nonsense. Quaker women played an important role in the convention, as they had religious beliefs that were completely different from the standard. These Quakers believed that women were in fact moral equals of men. This led them to seek the destruction of the barriers that men had created to limit women's rights, because they believed women had the same duty to seek enlightenment as men. By using God as a reason to justify their motives, the attendees of the convention were using religion as a reason to seek reform.
The Quaker and Haudenosaunee influence led suffragists to believe they were entitled to the right to vote. This led many women to take part in nationwide civil disobedience strategy, occurring in the decade after the Civil War, to bring attention to the right to suffrage in federal courts. Hundreds and possibly thousands of women attempted to vote. In Vineland, New Jersey, 183 women attempted to vote over a 4-year period. Women voted, claiming that they were not lawbreakers, but the federal government was the culprit for not protecting their right to vote. Women hoped to gain suffrage through federal courts until 1875, when the Supreme Court declared that suffrage didn't come with citizenship and that states could deny or grant suffrage.
As the women's suffrage movement progressed, activists sought to balance new visions introduced by the Quakers and the Haudenosaunee with Christian tradition. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony both founded several women's rights organizations, which in 1869 merged into the National Woman Suffrage Association. This organization was created to eliminate women's oppression in the United States. Members like Matilda Gage and Elizabeth Cady Stanton supported suffrage as a way to change the laws that kept women oppressed. The American Women's Suffrage Association was another women's rights organization, but one whose only goal was to obtain women's suffrage. These different goals kept the organization separated.
In the 1880s and 90s, Gage, Stanton, and other radicals feared their power was diminished by the large number of Christians with traditional views joining National Women's Suffrage Association. Susan B. Anthony aimed to stop the debate over religion in the organization, as she believed it divided suffragists and distracted them from their goal. Susan B. Anthony thought that anyone who supported suffrage was an asset to the organization. This led to the merger she initiated with the American Women's Suffrage Association and the National Women's Suffrage Association to form National American Women's Suffrage Association. The American Women's Suffrage Association supported differing ideas and beliefs similar to those of the Women Christian Temperance Union.
The Women Christian Temperance Union was a religious-based organization whose primary goal was to prohibit alcohol to benefit families. The union was strongly connected with the American Women's Suffrage Association. The Women Christian Temperance Union began to support suffrage, believing that once women could vote, they would work to get increased teachings of the church. The beliefs of the Women's Christian Temperance Union were controversial to the beliefs that radicals had based their organizations on, as they believed Christianity was the very foundation of women's oppression. Matilda Gage left the National American Women's Suffrage Association to form the Women's National Liberal Union, which was dedicated to countering oppressive religious beliefs. Stanton stayed in the National American Women's Suffrage Association and was elected president. She hoped that women's suffrage, once and if attained, would be used to support radical change.
Through resolution and struggle, the women's suffrage movement was born. After 72 years, the 19th Amendment was ratified on August 18th of 1920. The battle wasn't over, though. Women would have continued to fight against discrimination, especially women who were not white. By allowing them to look past the confines of their current state, the Haudenosaunee inspired them to fight for an equality that may have seemed unattainable. By believing women were truly men's equals, Quakers allowed women to justify their need for rights. Women's suffrage was an important step in the battle for gender equality and would lead to further change. Now that we've reached the 19th Amendment centennial, it is important to acknowledge and celebrate all the influences and allies on the road to women's suffrage.